Hello, everyone. In this episode, I took part in my first ever Lectio Divina session. I am sure Aaron is going to do a great job of explaining that in just a second, but before I start this episode, I want to encourage you to participate in this. So we start off with a meditation. I encourage you to do it with us. Aaron will be guiding us through it, and then afterward, to try to be with us as we discuss the text. More than discussing the text, we try to presence the text, which may all sound a bit vague, but it will become very clear very soon. This was a special experience that I got to share with my brother and my father, who I cherish very much. So please enjoy this episode. My dogs.
What a good referential
my
spirit.
dogs. What are we doing here? Aaron, what are we doing here?
Well, today it's the second day of Pentecost. We are at our elderly home.
The elderly.
This is our elder, and we figured we were having breakfast or a brunch this morning with the family.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you had this particular passage of what you felt. Was a good indication of perhaps the essence or something very important of Pentecost. And you were like, let's discuss that together. And then I shared something along the lines of, I think it would also be good to do because it is a sacred text. And I've been doing this with certain philosophical texts. But to perhaps do a Lectio Divina-like practice on this text. And I will go into what that means, but essentially Lectio Divina, it means a divine reading of a text, and you are it's a different way of how we usually approach text when we are very critical about something. I will explain, I think, a little bit more. Either I can start off with the explanation of the practice and then can let you introduce the text, or I can allow you to introduce it first and then I explain the practice. What do you prefer? Do you prefer? Yeah.
In terms of dynamics,
Yeah.
I think it's nice if we get a glimpse of the text and why,
Yeah.
and then you explain what you want to do and how you want to deepen it.
Yeah. So you don't have to read the text yet. That's going to come. You're going to read the entire passage soon, but you can perhaps introduce a little bit.
I'll tease out a little bit of the core verse.
And if I could say one more thing about the practice, and I'll probably repeat this, but one of the goals of the practice is really to presence the author. That's why usually in the Lectio Divina practice, when it was traditionally, let's say, a monasterial practice, it was about presencing God as sort of, let's say, the author of the divine word that is in the Bible. But in this case, you're very specifically going to look at a passage from Paul. So perhaps there's also a way of looking at, can we presence the perspective of St. Paul? And therefore it helps to get some context as to who wrote it, when, in what circumstances, so that we don't just blindly project who this Paul person could be, but that we have something to work with as we project, let's say, a more eternal perspective of what that could look like.
I'll give you a few tidbits.
Yeah, sounds good. Good. Go ahead.
So I asked you guys to meditate on this verse because a lot of things are happening, and because when we celebrate Pentecost, it's often about the story that we find in Luke and Acts.
Mm-hmm.
But Luke Acts is later than Paul. So I want to bring you back a little bit to the raw experience.
It's written later than Paul.
It's written later.
Yeah.
Of course, it's written later by someone who knows Paul very well.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. But nevertheless, sometimes we get lost in the story of what happened as Luke presents it. And I want to get you back to the experience of when Paul writes about this. And one of the weird things is that when he writes to his communities, it's really about why are people convinced that something is happening, because the Spirit has come in power. And we don't know what that means. What do they experience?
Mm.
And somehow Jesus gets venerated as God. What does that even mean? And somehow for Paul, this is life-changing. He sometimes calls the Holy Spirit the spirit of sonship, through which we say, Abba, Father. And I think that's the big revolution of Jesus. That's not in this text, though, so we're going to stick with Jesus for a while. Now, the text that I want to read you first is from the old King James Version, because it gives you a word that I want to add into it, and it comes from the Genesis. So I'm going to give you both in this context, because Paul needs to explain something. He is talking to people who are concerned. What's going on? Are we going to be resurrected with this body?
Yeah.
What happened to Jesus? Now, everybody knows that Jesus lived, so there's no dispute about that. Everybody knows that the apostles saw Jesus, so his whole audience is all there. But what does it mean for me? What is spirit? What is body? And I think in the little corner that you guys inhabit, there's a lot of talk with Peugeot and stuff like that, people like him, about spirits now.
Yeah, just like Lucas just lost some spirit as he was sneezing.
Bless me.
In some sense. Yeah.
And one of the meanings of spirit is called wind or breath. And there's something between spirit and heaven and earth. Now, so the little text I would like to share with you, that I would like you to meditate on, is this line. And so it is written. All comes from Genesis here. The first man, Adam, was made a living soul. And then he adds, the last Adam, a quickening spirit. So soul and spirit are very close to each other. And if you go to Genesis, it is about the moment that Adam is created from the dust. He is the man from the earth. He is the man from dust. And the man from dust, that's the body, is not yet a living soul. It's when the breath of God, the pnoe in the Septuagint, the breath of God, which sounds a bit like pneuma, huh?
Yeah.
The pnoe or pneuma from God is breathed by God into his nostrils, and then the man from dust becomes a man who is a living soul. And something happens. Animated, yes. Anima means you can really see there is light behind the eyes. Huh? Yeah. There is something going on there, and of course when Paul is thinking about this, he's thinking about what did Jesus do? So what happened to Jesus, and what does it mean for us that we now become something? Yeah. And that's when he comes to this sort of counterbalance, that on the one hand you have the first Adam who was from the dust. He was made a living soul, but the second Adam, who is from heaven, a quickening or life-giving spirit.
Good.
And I think that if we start meditating on that, I'm really curious as to what will happen to you guys in your thinking about what spirit is, or what Jesus did, or what happened.
Yeah, that's good. And before I go on with the explanation of the practice itself, could you say a little bit more about who Paul himself was? Because like the passage we're going to read is written by him. So who was he as an individual? What would you say is known?
Yeah, so we have the early church, with just a few years after Jesus, perhaps 10, perhaps 20. And then at one point in time, this Paul guy gets into conflict with the Jerusalem church. He is like the missionary, low status. And the brother of Jesus, James and Peter and John, they're all the pillars of the church. They're high status.
We're talking post his conversion, or is this
post his conversion?
Yeah. So we're leaving out some biographical details earlier, and we're focusing on the state he was in when he was.
I'm jumping right in.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's just a note.
But you're right. Paul is a late convert. He comes late to the party. He knows that. He says, "I'm late to the party." I know that. Yeah. I didn't know Jesus personally, and sometimes people hold that against me. So that's really there. But he's got a huge love for Jesus, but also for his own biography, and in that own biography, he really needs to know that something has changed, that we are transformed.
Yeah.
And that's important to him. And so when the discussion is about the resurrection, it's not just about the resurrection, it's also about his own relationship, that when Jesus came, something was so dramatically transformed that Paul himself, is transformed. Mm-hmm. And when the discussion, and that's the interesting part, we sometimes discuss about the resurrection of Jesus, That was not the resurrection in this community. So the groups who were opposed to each other did not have a disagreement about whether or not Jesus was seen by his disciples after his death. There was no discussion about that. That was clear. And that you can see in the rhetoric. That's assumed common knowledge. What is not clear, what that means for our personal resurrection. And this passage is about that resurrection. Can we trust that our body will be formed? Do we need to envisage a physical heaven that we go into or not? That's what this passage is about.
Good.
Once we've read it, I'd like you to leave that behind a little bit and to focus on what's happening with Jesus, because that's where the transformation lies.
Yeah, I think the format of the practice will work well. I'll speak a little bit to the practice, and then we'll start off with a small meditation just to get into a different mindset than we are in right now. That's, I think, the most important thing, that you bring a more reverential attitude, not just in your thinking, but perhaps your entire body a little bit. So the practice it's inspired by Lectio Divina, but it's first, let's say, transformed by Ran Lahav, who is doing a lot in philosophical contemplative exercises, and he calls this particular exercise, I think it's philosophical contemplative companionship, and it has that notion of being a companion, so someone you break bread with, like kompanos, but then the version that I sort of have been practicing is the one that's been transformed from that into something slightly different but quite similar by John Vervaeke, who everyone knows in this little corner, and he calls it philosophical fellowship. So he likes that word companionship, but he also thinks there's something about the ancient notion of friendship that got lost as we sort of transformed into the current era, and we confuse our friends with our bodies, and like not our bodies, but a body, let's say, in that sense. And for him, it's therefore very important to also try to revive something of what it means to be a fellow. What does it mean to stand in fellowship? And obviously, we have this as the first part of the Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring. So there's something about a bond among people who are all engaged in a project that carries a lot of meaning and value, and there's something about that also allows you to be transformed within that, because you're all committed to the similar degree. So I think that's the starting point. The practice itself, it will go in the following way. There's a couple of rounds. We start off with a guided meditation, and I'll try to keep this relatively brief, but it might take something like at least 10 minutes. Yeah. So we'll see if we fast forward or not. Then we're going to start off with a very slow reading of the passage. I would like you to do the slow reading of the passage. And the idea then is to do so mindfully. And the people who listen, so that's me and you, we try to, maybe it's good to close your eyes, that's really up to you, but to sort of not think immediately about what do I think about this, but just try to take in each word that is said as a gift, something, the metaphor that was used that I really like was almost like the ancient word of conception, that try to think of how it's related to conceiving. If you're conceiving a child, and you're a witness to a child being born, there's something beautiful about that, even though it's a very sort of natural event, but it's also it's incredibly beautiful. And perhaps try to imagine that that's possible with each new word, with each new aspect that is added in this practice. So you read the entire passage once, and you don't have to worry. I'll briefly remind you of that when we get there. Then for the second round, so that's the first round. The second round, you select one sentence. I think it's the sentence you just selected, and you repeat that sentence, and then we repeat sort of after you. So then I go, then Lucas goes, then we go back, and we do that 4 times. Perhaps the first time it's good to show it in the actual scripture, because it might help a little bit if we don't remember it right. And the idea there is that you might try out slightly different intonations each time you repeat, so that you don't just repeat automatically, but you try to feel sort of the different flavors, the different ways in which all these words carry a different aspect, a different meaning. What does it mean to sort of emphasize perhaps the word breath? What does it mean to emphasize the word soul? What does it mean to emphasize Adam?
Okay. So if now you explain,
Yeah.
I very much like that because
Yeah.
I think it's the little sentence, a very little sentence.
Yeah.
It's about who is the human being,
Yeah.
who is Jesus.
Exactly.
What is the transformation of the human being from a body of dust to a living soul? What's the transformation of Jesus?
So you
from
slowly
a
get that going.
From a man in Nazareth
Yeah.
to a life-giving spirit.
Exactly. So there's
Okay,
all these words,
yeah.
like, and it also helps then to, because we are very much used to thinking about what do I think about this, or how am I going to do the different intonation. But then again, as the others are, repeating the sentence, try again to use their intonations, their words as a gift again. That you're like, I'm bearing witness to this different way of looking at it.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that 4 times. Then we do another round again 4 times, where you just in one sentence, maybe maximum 2 or 3, but you say like, what does this passage, this sentence, what is it evoking you, or perhaps what is it provoking you, and that always with the goal of eventually invoking, let's say in this case, the spirit, behind the text. So it would be perhaps the perspective of Saint Paul. So you do so very briefly. So like it provokes a sense of awe, or it evokes a sense of awe, or it provokes some confrontational attitude. I notice that you kind of see like you're trying to get a sense of what the text is actually calling out in you. You do that again 4 times. Then there's a round where we do a little bit more engaged speech, and there we do this only 1 round where you can speak a little bit more freely. You take, let's say, maybe a minute, maybe a maximum of 3 minutes, something like that. Don't get too hung up over the numbers, but just so you get a rough idea, where you really speak to, okay, I've noticed that this passage, it really reminds me of this. So you speak a little bit more freely here. You're allowed to relate it to something of your own life, for instance. You don't have to do that. In general, during the entire practice, by the way, it's very much discouraged to constantly relate it back to what your own opinion about it is, or how it relates to your own life, because you're trying to make central precisely the passage itself, the perspective that brought it forth, and not so much like, this is what I think of it, or this is how it relates to me, or this is what it relates to what I know about this already. Like, no, it's something new. Let something be born. And then finally, after you do that for 1 round, there's the free play, the free speech round, similar to the estuary final round, where there's no longer an order we're following. We just use that to respond to each other's perspectives, again with this attitude of like, okay, what are we all bringing, and can we sort of appreciate what other people are saying, always with the intentions not to be authoritative or argumentative, like do I agree or disagree, but always like, can we sort of see how all of this adds up to this perspective behind the text, to really make it central. So I think that's the practice. And
this is where we initiate the meditation. I will turn the video off for this segment to get you into the right mind state.
You can follow my voice. It's normal to close your eyes. I will do so too, but perhaps just so you know, we're going to start off with centering our posture. So that means that if you close your eyes, you might not see this, but what I will do is I will tilt slightly back and front with my body, and then with my head, and then side to side with my body, side to side with my head. So I sort of find my center first physically. So just so you know, when we meditate, that will be the goal. Okay. So close your eyes and try to get comfortable. Perhaps try to also sit up. It's very important that you don't sit overly alertly, but also that you don't fall back into relaxation. I want you to start off by centering your posture. So that means slightly tilting your body, your upper body, back to front. And as you do so, you perhaps do so a little bit less each time, so that you're trying to intimate, where's the center for me? When am I feeling centered? Back to front a little bit less each time, until you feel that you are centered. Now you do so from side to side. Just a little bit less each time. Trying to intimate when you're feeling centered. Now you do so with just your head, so back to front. A little bit less each time. And side to side. And now as you're sitting still, centered, relax your legs, your abdomen, your chest, your arms, your shoulders, your hands, your neck, your face. Try to sink into this centered position where you're both perfectly still and also very alert. And now slowly aim your attention to your breath, following the sensations of inhalation, exhalation. Notice where you are breathing. You're breathing in your chest, or you're breathing abdominally. If you are breathing in your chest, then while not forcing it, slowly over time, allow the breathing to go down into your abdomen. And just follow those sensations. And then finally, for this part, let's try to get centered in our attitude. So whenever we feel our mind drifting off, just gently, politely, friendly, redirect it back to the breathing. Don't be too harsh or too strict on yourself, but also don't carelessly allow yourself to wander off. Gently tell yourself, stay, and focus back on the breathing. And if you notice you've been distracted, try to identify what's going on with a more general word. If maybe you remember something that happened earlier today or yesterday, so then use an ing word like remembering. Maybe you were thinking of something ahead, so you label it with imagining, or fearing, stressing. And as you label it, you go back to the breathing. So keep this in mind as we're now gonna try to feel rooted. It might help for this part of the exercise if you imagine through this imaginal space placed exactly above you, right above you, and that with each inhalation this space expands in every direction until you start exhaling again and it contracts to a minimum. So imagine that perhaps 4 times. So inhale, expanding out. Exhale, contracting back in. So do so 4 times. And now very slowly that same space, now with an inhalation as it expands out, allow with the exhalation that it contracts back into that space in between your eyes. Inhale, expanding out. Exhale, contracting to your chest area. Inhale, expanding out. Exhale to your abdomen. Inhale, expanding out. Exhale to where you're sitting. Inhale, feeling nourished by the ground you're sitting on. As you are rooting yourself firmly in that ground, imaginally so. So with each inhalation, feeling the rootedness, and with each exhalation, the nourishment. And also imagine that 4 times. For the final exercise, it's called the Socratic ignorance exercise, where you briefly, and usually we do this in 2 aspects, but I'll now do them simultaneously, where you think mindfully to yourself, both inward inside me, but also outward in the world. In both those dimensions, there's so much that I do not know about myself, about the world, because of all of the facts. And say that quietly, mindfully to yourself, perhaps a few times. All of the facts, combinatorially explosive. So much I do not know because of all of the facts. And then secondly, both within and without, there's so much I will never know because of all of the fate. Everything in time you have no final control over. Things happening in your life, in the world, that happen in a particular way, could have happened in a different way, but do not. There's so much I do not know because of all of the fate. And thirdly, both within and without, there's so much I refuse to see because of all of my foolishness. And finally, both within and without, there's so much I'm unable to see because of all of my faults and my finitude. And now that you've gone through the process of humility, try to mindfully with each inhalation do some further emptying, and then with each exhalation allowing space for new insight, new connections, new wisdom. So with each inhalation, some emptying. With each exhalation, a filling up. And do that a few times. But perhaps within now and the span of a minute at your own time when you feel comfortable. Very slowly. Get out of the practice as you try to integrate what you feel you've cultivated here in terms of your sense of cognition, your consciousness, your sense of community and culture. And perhaps we'll do one quick round where you just say what you are noticing right now. So you could start with a sentence saying, being here with you, I'm noticing just in this moment, whatever comes up. Do you want to start?
Being with you, I experience a deep love.
Being here with you, I'm experiencing a deep curiosity.
Being with you, I notice getting warmer. Maybe, I don't know if that was turned on.
I don't
Was
think
it?
so.
Well, I'm getting warmer either way. So
That's good.
that's what I'm noticing.
So would you like to start with a slow, mindful reading of the passage that you had in mind for us today? And we will listen.
Yeah.
But someone will ask, how are the dead raised? With what kind of body do they come? Fool! What you sow does not come to life unless it dies. And as for what you sow, you do not sow the body that is to be, but a bare seed, perhaps of wheat or of some other grain. But God gives it a body as He has chosen, and to each kind of seed its own body. Not all flesh is alike, but there is one flesh for human beings, another for animals, another for birds, and another for fish. There are both heavenly bodies and earthly bodies, But the glory of the heavenly is one thing, and that of the earthly is another. There is one glory of the sun, and another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars. Indeed, star differs from star in glory. So it is with the resurrection of the dead. What is sown is perishable, what is raised is imperishable. It is sown in dishonor, but it is raised in glory. It is sown in weakness, it is raised in power. It is sown a physical body, it is raised a spiritual body. If there is a physical body, there is also a spiritual body. Thus it is written, the first man, Adam, became a living being, a living soul. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit. But it's not the spiritual that is first, but the physical, the soul, and then the spiritual. For the first man was from the earth, a man of dust. The second man is from heaven. As was the man of dust, so are those who are of the dust. And as is the man of heaven, so are those who are of heaven. Just as we have borne the image of the man of dust, we will also bear the image of the man of heaven. What I'm saying, brothers and sisters, is this: flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom of God, nor does the perishable inherit the imperishable. Listen, I will tell you a mystery. We will not all die, but we will all be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet.
Let's take one brief moment of silence before you, as we contemplate what was just said, as you select this very short sentence to read out very soon.
So first, what was written? The first man, Adam, became a living being, a living soul. And then what's new? The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
You can say it again. Sentence. I'm going to do this 4 times.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The same one, right?
Yes.
The first man, Adam. I had it, but you put it back.
Sorry.
In. The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first human being became a living soul. the last Adam, became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first Adam became a living soul. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
The first man, Adam, became a living being. The last Adam became a life-giving spirit.
So now we do a round of short speech where you, perhaps in a sentence, perhaps one more, say, what does this text, this passage, what does it evoke in you? Or perhaps what does it provoke in you? All in the intent of invoking the spirit behind the text.
You can start with Lucas now.
I guess, well, you changed from being to soul, and for me what it provokes is a curiosity into examining the difference or the similarity between soul and spirit.
The text sort of brings up in me a sense of the course of history and its importance throughout humanity.
I was very much stirred by the reading that Aron did on became. Something happened so that man became a living soul. And something happened so that Jesus became a life-giving spirit.
Mm-hmm.
They do it again?
Yes, we do this 4 times.
Well, it provokes in me, I didn't know the last Adam was Jesus, but it provokes in me the question of why would Jesus be the last Adam?
Mm-hmm. I guess what is evoked is a sense of urgency too.
What it does with me is a sense of circularity. God's breath in Genesis being a spirit that makes Adam a living soul, and Jesus in the end becoming a life-giving spirit, becoming in a way God's breath.
Man became God so that God could become man, or God became man so that man could become God, I think.
I also experience a sense of novelty, that this what has become automatic sometimes can be radically new through those who experienced it as new in that time.
I think for Paul there is also something about the quality of that life. He was already the first Adam, a living soul, but there was more life to be had.
Okay, I'm in the final round of this short speech.
I feel it evokes in me the idea that we're all born as the first Adam, and perhaps we have the opportunity to become the last one in a way.
I also feel there's this call to transform, which is both exciting and scary, I guess.
And I'm left with the awe of the sovereignty of God, who gives a body to each of us as he likes, and to each phase of us or transformation of us as he chooses. There is something beautiful in letting that happen.
So I should perhaps take a moment to think over what was said. You now have one round, so instead of 4, we now do one round where we still follow the order, so we start with Lucas, and we speak a little bit more freely, so more than 1 or 2 sentences. You could speak a minute, maybe 2 minutes, about, does this perhaps remind you of something? Does it bring up any memory? Like, how does it relate to something that's going on inside you, as you are allowed to speak a little bit more freely this time?
Well, I definitely feel inspired by it. The idea of becoming a life-giving spirit speaks to me, and to kind of give life to the environment around you, the people around you, is it's a beautiful thing to me, and I see it as possible. I like the idea of transformation alongside of it, with it.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking a lot about how perhaps someone like Nietzsche is going through my head, and like, what is the importance of the body, of the flesh? How does it relate to the importance of the spirit? Are they both equally important? Is it important that one is transformed at the expense of the other? Those are thoughts I was having, and I would say fortunately also felt were productively, constructively challenged. But I also felt some confrontation from it still. So I'm definitely interested to continue exploring this, and the final thing I'll add is that I am touched by, again, this sense of novelty, and I'm reminded of all the times in my own life when I came across something that was like a revelation, that I had to really, like, whoa, this has implications, like, what does this mean? And just to kind of feel like it lands, and to be able to put that into words can be an amazing feeling of both giving shape to something while being shaped by it. I think that's powerful. Yeah.
Of course, I will always want to go back to Jesus and see what's happening there. And I think Paul and his fellow believers are also doing that, and they're still trying to make sense of why Jesus had to die. And how powerful he became by becoming a spirit. Becoming not a spirit, by becoming spirit, life-giving spirit, by becoming the Holy Spirit, by becoming the creative spirit, and how the spirit gained personality. Because that what becomes spirit carries in it the personality of the seed, the DNA of the seed. So Jesus here on earth tells us about the character of the Holy Spirit that he has become. So it's easy for Paul to speak about the Spirit as both being the Spirit of God and the Spirit of Jesus without making any distinction between the two.
Mm.
But it has become so much richer because we have come to know the Father, because we know the Son. We have seen his spitting image. We've seen the work he does. The work, it's very Johannine now that I'm referring to. Jesus says, I'm coming to you, I'm coming back to you, I'm with you. I am with you. His personality is with us. And he is God's personality. I think that's so astounding. I think here's the birth of how we experience God in Jesus, Jesus in God, Jesus and God in us.
Yeah.
I think it's been born here.
Mm.
Mm-hmm. Just take a moment again. Just a brief moment. And now the final part is really the free play round where you are allowed to perhaps respond to what you heard, other matters that come to mind that you want to share, again always with this receptive attitude and never with an opinionated or authoritative attitude, but always wanting to learn more from perhaps other insights shared in the room as to invoke the spirit behind the text. So whoever wants to start, there's no order anymore. So
I was very happy with what Lucas was doing. He was trying to figure out what would happen to him if he would become a life-giving spirit.
mm-hmm.
So I'd like you to expand on that a bit.
Well, it reminds me of the Gnostics that...
Of the Gnostics?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That they want to think about becoming Jesus, right? Am I correct to say that?
No, you're always correct.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't want to get into the role of teacher.
That's authoritative. It's okay.
I thought I shouldn't be authoritative.
Yeah. None of us should be.
Well, yeah. No, well, it's always spoken to me, the idea that Jesus is there, and the coming of Jesus is there to allow us to reach higher somehow. And maybe he makes that attainable, and that's what it calls forth for me.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, I don't fully know that. I don't always know what that looks like, because I don't know if you were speaking about personality, I don't know if I understand his personality very well.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my biggest issues I've been having lately, that we spoke about friendship. I don't know if Jesus is my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it hard to know someone without leveling with them. So I'm trying to find a way to get closer to him.
That's a good question, yeah.
But I feel that life-giving aspect coming to me as I try to become more like him.
Uh-huh.
So I see how it works. I just I don't know where it's going to lead.
It is really fascinating how I understand why it was worthwhile to ponder over this text during Pentecost, having the mythos of the disciples, the apostles, like as they were speaking all these different tongues and people being astonished by it, and what does that mean? It sort of, it has this sense of like, it's no longer just each individual for themselves. I'm not saying it was ever like that, but it certainly seemed to have been like that when Adam was created, because it was only one person. It was unclear how he would then at that point.
Yeah.
Obviously he was given tasks. And there's this interesting sense that we are called out after that to both receive life and to pass it forward, and not in this zero-sum manner, but in this, like, no, there's abundance. And that's, I think that's also, it's powerful. It's difficult to fully wrap your mind around, let's say, but it is powerful if you allow it to land.
Mm.
Yeah.
I like the notion of your zero-sum game, because when Jesus talks about the parable of the sower, it is about the seed that can carry... A lot of seed just loses it. I mean, it doesn't come to fruition. But some of the seed does take hold in fertile ground. And if that happens, it carries a fruit of 30, 60, 100 times. And I think that connects a little bit to what you were saying, that you can pass on that life to others. And I see that multiplication in the mythos that you're talking about, when the one fire of Jesus becomes fire on the heads of at least the 12, but there was said to be 120 people, so it's like a huge multiplication of spirit that takes place there.
Mm-hmm. I also I'm also kind of touched in some ways by, like, as you were saying about God as Jesus, Jesus as God, Jesus and God in us, that there's almost this sense of, like, you know, how do we get the relation of God to humanity, how does it work out, and that there were, and that's both, like, it's a difficult process, and I think that's clear, and also we see this sort of really summarized, that Adam was given breath, spirit, made into a living being, but not yet to the extent that Adam himself could be like God.
Mm.
And Jesus being in likeness to God, Jesus being God, is able, in fact, to sort of, to finally fulfill that whole process of God coming closer and closer to humanity, where in the past we saw that sometimes people got too close, almost, and not in without any initiation, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that the time was ripe, but also that someone stood up, that someone lived up to it, and that was Jesus. And I think everyone is sort of realizing that there's this sense of, like, wow, what has happened now, and yeah, again, what does this mean? And it's just so basically, I got this sense of, like, wow, it must have been an interesting process for God too, to kind of be like, I am approaching, but not quite, but it's also part of the plan, because it can't just sort of. So there's this, and then eventually that happening through Jesus is it's kind of interesting. It makes me think differently than I had before about what experiences could have been like for God. If it's not blasphemous to talk in those.
Hey, you're
Yeah,
this is you.
that's true. Yeah.
But what it does with me, of course, is it links back to where Lucas started off with, the beautiful theology of God becoming man, so that man might become God.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul is doing here, what we were listening to, was talking about a man from dust,
Yeah.
raised by the Spirit of God to be a living soul. So he was raised to life more than the animals. Huh? I mean, the animals get their, as Ecclesiastes says it, gets their spirit from the earth.
Yeah.
But man gets its spirit from God, its breath from God, and it awakens something in him. But it's a promise. And it's a promise that man himself or herself cannot fulfill. And so you get man from heaven that he's talking about, that we may be alike, that becomes like us,
Yeah.
to fulfill that promise, to fulfill that calling, and to sort of take us with him through his Spirit. So the whole purpose of Jesus becoming fully man was to give that DNA, that character, that story
Mhm.
to spirit. So it wasn't just a sort of a spirituality like, oh yes, there's the divine universe in us or something like that.
Mhm.
No. It's personal. It's because Jesus is a person. It's personal. It's a real person that fills and characterizes that spirit that is able to transform us.
Mhm.
And that makes it almost like that's why we humans can now experience it, because it has become mythos, because it has become something we can relate to.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm tempted to get a little bit sidetracked, but I also want to return a little bit to Paul and try to sort of get his perspective behind this too. And I think like we've alluded to it many times, but what was the experience like for Paul as he was concluding this, writing this? Was he concluding matters as he was writing? Was he did he have the conclusion? Was he writing after the fact? And what is really this? Are we feeling urgency? Are we feeling peace? Are we feeling seriousness? Like, and I'm trying to return to that. What is your sense as you heard the passage? Was it the seriousness? Was it a peace? Was it the...
I don't know. I feel like I'd like to read the whole thing. You know what I mean? I can't get a good sense of it within this passage. I also don't know if I know Paul well enough for that. So I don't think I can answer that very well.
You may want to become friends first.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
What is your sense?
Well, I'm very serious about this. You may want to become friends with Paul first before you start understanding him, because yes, he there is a lot of learning as you write in Paul. I mean, he's responding to things, he's emotional, a lot of things are happening, but he is also a very seasoned believer. We're now, say, some 20 years after his own seeing the Lord. He sees the Lord in a vision. He sees the resurrected Jesus in glory when he is on the road to Damascus. So he's talking about this glorious image. This is his experience. So this has been with him for the past 20 years now. Yeah. So that's mature. At the same time, the discussion going on in in Corinth is really unsettling for him. And he's trying to feel his way to what he has to write. And sometimes he's writing things and then he gets to 2 Corinthians and he's saying, well, I wrote it and you got very sad about it. But see, now there is repentance. And also, I'm actually now happy that I wrote it. Although I also think that I may have sort of hurt you and I didn't want to hurt you. So you see, there's a lot of that going on in the immediate context of writing the letter, and it's a very seasoned believer who has seen the glory of the Lord 20 years ago and is living with that. And his mysticism, Schweitzer talks about the mysticism of Paul. It's clear, and he can talk about that he has had visions and has ascended into heaven. So he is a seasoned believer as well. So I think both of what you're trying to detect is in there.
And I'm perfectly happy and satisfied with not, let's say, watering it down to he's just happy, or he's very serious, or because I'm getting a sense of everything. So like there's definitely an overwhelming quality to it as well, which I do not mind, because I can imagine it was overwhelming in the time, and I think it's, let's say, a continuous task to realize that it's like, this is not normal, right? Like it's not just an everyday matter that took place here. It's radical, and so I find that definitely touching.
I do feel he has a bit of a prophetic nature to him in this passage specifically. Like you feel the need to speak these words, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I will tell you a mystery. We will not all die, but we will all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet. You know, like this feels... I don't know if urgent is the word that I'm looking for, but it's definitely...
Yeah.
It's almost like celebratory, Yeah. There's been a transformation. Like he's...
I like that he says it's a mystery too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Like that he doesn't say like, I will tell you what you have to believe from now
Yeah,
onwards.
yeah.
It's like, no, this is very confusing.
Yeah, he's still in awe with
Yeah.
the knowledge that he
Exactly.
has, because the knowledge he has
Yeah.
isn't defined.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's not yet a system, huh? A system like you live here, then you die, you go to heaven or something.
Yeah.
No, there are people who die, and there are people who will see the Lord before they die. The Lord is coming back. So there's this. It's all very open, but there's also something coming.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, like there's. I'm also trying to. Do you feel like obviously this Paul was both? He was an historical character, and yet there's also a sense in which we are reading him with a sense of reverence today, and we're not the only ones doing that. Is there a sense in which you, because you already talked about befriending Paul, in which you can feel a sense of Paul being there in the room with you? How would you relate to it? And I'm also curious to hear what you feel about it. But
Yeah, Paul is a big friend of mine. A tough one, though, to love, because he can be obnoxious. But he is so close to Jesus. He's so touched by Jesus. Someone said, do you think Paul is a mature believer? Some people now are asking, is Jordan Peterson mature? If you see some of his... Well, that's Paul. It's all there. And you learn to love him. Because he has this powerful emotion, he has left words for basically that were not that important during his lifetime, because as I said, he was a secondary preacher. He was not as important as Peter or John. He wasn't as important as the brothers of Jesus like James and Jude. He was the missionary worker. And he has left words that carried the church forward into the 2nd century and then onward. So in a way, his life became part of that spirit. And I think that's very nice about what you were starting off with, Lucas. As you can be a life-giving spirit. Well, as I said, it was essential for the heavenly man to become Jesus of Nazareth in order for us to understand what it meant for us and be lifted up by him. But I also think that we, like Paul, have a task of embodying that spirit, so that the spirit indwells us and we embody it, and that we give it story and context and mythos and pass that on. So I think the testimony of what the Spirit is doing in your life is as important as explaining the Bible to other people.
Otherwise we will be reading about an abstract principle and not someone from Nazareth, right?
Then we miss the whole incarnation.
Yeah, exactly.
The incarnation also in your life.
Yeah, so it's good.
Yeah, which is more powerful than...
And what is your sense? Do you feel that some of these past perspectives, and I would perhaps include people like Plato, but for now, Paul, in this moment, do you feel that you can like make it present, or is he therefore too distant? Like, is he too distant from you for that to happen?
Well, no. At the moment, yes, because I don't feel like I'm reading the New Testament actively, but I feel most authors that I read that are long gone, that have large bodies of work, I definitely feel the presence. Definitely think you can internalize them as well. So yeah, I would say so.
So I'd say perhaps it's useful to go to a final round of reflection, where I'd like to hear from everyone just a little bit on what you are planning to integrate from this practice. From, did you gain any new insight, but perhaps also to reflect a little bit on the format. So not just the contents that were shared, but also did the format contribute anything, and in what way? But that's really up to you. But I'm just giving some opportunities, let's say, or some possibilities that you can choose. Does anyone want to start on what their takeaways essentially?
Well, maybe I'll start in the format because I've never done it before and I've listened to it. It's definitely different to participate. When I listened to John doing it in his After Socrates, I found it hard to kind of really get into it when you're not there. But I do think it's powerful to really sit with a small passage, kind of to force yourself to give that structure. The analogy I like to give is that it's like, for me, it's like taking a yoga class compared to stretching myself. And usually when I stretch, I do it pretty mindlessly, you know what I mean? I think this adds that divine quality that reading can have, that I don't always take with it. So I've often read for practical purposes, and this allows me to kind of, to bring the spirit of the text into it. So that I'm a big fan of. As for takeaways, I don't know, usually when I read the New Testament, it's just a deepening of my integration of it and faith, and maybe sharpening my understanding and who I want to be, what I want to serve, and how I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything where I'm really like, oh, I didn't realize that. I usually don't have that when I learn about biblical specific things about the Bible, but it's more deepening.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah, for me, now that you finish, if that's okay. But for me, it was interesting because I haven't I haven't performed this specific technique on scriptural texts at all. I've performed it on people like with texts written by Plato, Spinoza, Simone Weil, Iris Murdoch, and I could mention a few more like Meister Eckhart, like Kei Nishitani, and it was also always very, very interesting. But this was also very impactful in a different way, because I noticed that usually you try to keep as much as you can an imminent reading, stay within the text, stay within the passage that you read. But I also noticed that it was almost impossible to do so, because, as you said, the incarnation principle is like you immediately link it to that whole life. It's very difficult to try to stick within the words, and at the same time, it was also very valuable to have that sort of focus on that sentence that you very nicely selected, and to hear the different intonations, because first time I heard it, I was like, okay, this is what it means. I was like, wait, it's slightly different if you, as you already pointed out, if you emphasize Adam, or if you emphasize became, it adds a slightly different flavor. I don't know what to call it. But it has a different character almost about it, and that allows you to sort of at least get a fuller sense of what this must have been like for Paul as he was writing every individual word down, obviously not in English, but nonetheless like something that he did mindfully and yet with a sense of urgency. And I'm very grateful for like all the perspectives were added on top sort of my initial impression, and I was very happy to listen. So and grateful to do it with family members. That's also the first time for me. So
nice.
Yeah. So thank you both.
Thank you.
First, your contribution. We put the canned jam for the frisbee on the grass yesterday or day before yesterday to celebrate someone's birthday. And I remember that you're always the one who introduces new games to us. And you also like to explain the rules of the game. That fits you very well. And what happens is that we learn to play the game differently. So we had a different conversation now than we had yesterday evening.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. It's a very nice way of taking the same reverence and attitude and love toward each other, and stay away a little bit of the traditional roles that you might have in a family or in a church group or what have you, but just do it together with this text. So that is something that I really appreciate. And the takeaway from the text itself is again how people in Paul's days were struggling with the sadness of having to lose Jesus at Easter. And why did he have to die? And then people will have all kinds of theology as to why he has to die. But this also is true. If he would not have died, he would not have become this life-giving spirit. And the power of Jesus is precisely that, because his spirit is living in us. That makes him so incredibly powerful. And if you're talking about becoming a life-giving spirit, Lucas, that really, that really touches me, because I think that was the consolation that they got after Jesus' death on the cross. But now something has changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No longer bound to place or time. He can be like God. He can be everywhere at any time with us. So, I'm very happy with this little nugget that is in Paul's letter. Just sad we don't have 20 more letters.
Yeah.
Well, at least we got these.
Yeah. No, it's good. And I have other, I had connections that came up, but that would have taken me a little bit too much outside of the text itself.
Yeah.
So I kept it for myself, but I was happy to sort of keep it so focused. So, thank you both. It's your podcast, so whatever you want to do.
You're the man.
Anything you guys want to sell?
No, thank you.
Sell your products? No, this is great. So, be interesting to see if anyone went along for the ride, if they did the meditation. I do think I want to keep it in, because you did a lot of good instruction during it. And yeah, I'm curious to see what else this medium can be used for. For example, with the Plato text, I'd be curious to do it. But yeah, I just want to thank you guys for making the time. I still don't really know what Pentecost is, actually. They told me yesterday it's the birthday of the church. Is that true?
In a way, yes, because as Jesus dies and his spirit is passed on to us, we now carry as a group.
So it's the passing of the Spirit.
It's Jesus' spirit embodied in the church, in us.
Ah, I see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, great. I
Yeah.
know. But thank you guys. This is pretty much my outro. If you guys want to have anything good.
Yeah.
Good.
No, I mean, one thing is that and that came to mind, I also like how the sense of the different languages that the disciples spoke, it's really the opposite, again, like we were talking about too, the Tower of Babel, when humanity themselves sort of were like, okay, we're gonna build up to God, and then division, different languages. And now it's like you have the different languages as to, indeed, give life, to go forth, go out into the world. So it's not to divide, it's actually to unify, even though to unify through difference. So it's very interesting, as opposed to attempt to unify and therefore you become...
Is this where I place my rant about English becoming the dominant language in the world?
I think that is... Yes.
Yeah, you can just insert it. That's true.
We will say au revoir, tot ziens.
Hasta la próxima.
And good.
Good. All right. Finish it here.
Sounds good.